Cosmology for Dummies. It's a little article I found written by Dave Simmons. First of all, a lot of people ask what was before the Big Bang. That's a relatively easy one to answer. Nothing. No matter, no energy, nothing but nothing. Not even a vacuum. There wasn't even any space for something to occupy. No time for it to exist in. There wasn't a before. I have to add that Christians like to say that there's a God and that he's always existed and that he didn't have a beginning and nobody created him, he just always was. And my thought is, one of my biggest questions has become, what was he doing with his time before the universe, before he made everything in this vacuum where there was not anything, not even space for anything to exist in. There was just nothing. Where was God during this time? What was he doing? Just sitting around, bobbing to and fro, up and down, biding his time, millennia after millennia after millennia. Anyway, apparently so, according to Christianity. So what led from this nothing to, well, everything? The original Big Bang suggested that every single piece of matter that now exists was originally scrunched up to a point so small it stops having any dimension at all. A singularity. In cases like this, some suggested all that matter came from a previous collapsed universe. That's kind of what I hold to that idea. Nowadays, scientists use terms like a quantum fluxation resulting in a particle of negative pressure vacuum energy, which to me sounds like something from Star Trek, but apparently it's perfectly acceptable to allow the universe to spontaneously generate in this way, and it's backed up by empirical tests. Either way, you now have your singularity, either a zero event point containing everything or one containing nothing. Your mileage may vary, but not by as much as you'd imagine. At this point, you stand well back. Do not attempt to return to a lit singularity within a fraction of a second that's too small for the human mind to begin to envision comfortably. There is a blinding flash and an outrushing of a staggering size and velocity. In this instant, the building blocks of energy, gravity, space, and time are flung out. Temperatures are around 10 billion degrees Celsius. As it expands, things start to gradually cool down, cohering into sub-elementary particles and eventually matter. Within 3 minutes, the light show is over, its spectacular stage, and 98% of the matter that will ever exist exists. After all the excitement, it's merely a matter of waiting for things to settle down and waiting for all the helium and hydrogen to dump together into stars, which in turn eventually supernova and produce just about every heavy element above lithium on the periodic table, which then begin to form new star systems with actual planets. It's all a bit of Newtonian by this point, and not nearly as exciting to watch. If you wait around about 11.5 billion years, important things like tea and sponge cakes and pocket-sprung mattresses find ways to come into being. Oh, and life also. There's a lot of evidence to back up the theories behind the Big Bang so far. Perhaps most notably, the background radiation from the event itself, which fills the night sky in all directions and reaches the Earth in the form of red-shifted microwave radiation. You've all actually witnessed this. If you turn on a TV and tune it to a dead station, about 1% of the hissing static you see will be these microwaves. As Bill Bryson says, if you ever complain there's nothing on TV, you can always sit and watch the birth of the universe. There's also a lot of minor inconsistencies in the theory, which will only get a brief mention because frankly they're way too scientific. Scientists are still working out the fine details and adding to the theory. It's all rather cutting edge considering it's talking about something which happened so long ago. And there you have it, a reasonable explanation as to how everything came about without anyone having to poke it to make sure it works, or say, let there be light. It's quite possible a supreme being would do exactly the same thing and create the singularity needed, but there's no necessity for there to be such a being. I'll not quote any specific sources for all this. To be honest, most of it is rather boring, horribly technical, and long-winded. If you're interested, search Wikipedia for inflationary universe and Big Bang. We'll provide you a couple of lengthy articles with lots of science with a capital S, the hows, whys, wherefores, and possible problems with the theory. If you're interested, but not to the point of doing a degree in physics, I'd recommend Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything, which covers it all and a lot of other things in a well-written, easy-to-understand, and humorous way. Abiogenesis, the emergence of living cells from non-living matter, remains difficult to understand for theists and atheists alike, although the former are naturally far more skeptical about it than the latter. The maker of the YouTube video below does a remarkably good job of explaining the abiogenesis hypothesis. Before I play this video, I just have to say, I find it amusing that Christians have a hard time believing that living things could come from dead things like rocks. That life can come from rocks. They have a hard time with that. And yet, what is dirt? They have no trouble at all thinking that man could be formed from dirt. A non-living thing. Anyway, so I'm going to play this video.
When Bill O'Reilly asked Kirk Cameron to give his best shot in proving the existence of God, this is what he said.
The fact that a painting proves there must be a painter, the human body proves there must be a designer because of its complexity and because of the information we can see down at the DNA level.
The problem for fundamentalists like Cameron is that this argument can be too easily flattened. In this video, I want to show what scientists have actually deduced about the origins of life. So let's start by putting the artist and painting myth to rest. Why can't paintings paint themselves? Simple, because they're made of chemicals that can't replicate themselves. Living matter, on the other hand, does contain a chemical that can replicate itself. Even if God made DNA, he doesn't need to intervene every time animals mate. The DNA does the job on its own. So the real question is, how did DNA appear? How did living matter come from non-living sludge? Here again, fundamentalists need to drop a common argument that seems to be based on complete ignorance of current scientific hypotheses, which is this. Of course, that's not what scientists believe. Life popping out of nowhere is no better a theory than life popping out of the hand of a deity. So what do scientists believe about the origin of life? Let's take this step by step. The first step involves looking at the primordial Earth 4.7 billion years ago. There it is, mostly wet, very warm, and with an atmosphere composed of all sorts of gases. Hydrogen, hydrogen cyanide, methane, and ammonia among them. DNA is a long-chain molecule made from just 4 different types of nucleotide. So the first question is, where did the nucleotides come from? In 1961, a researcher called Juan Oro left hydrogen cyanide and ammonia to stew in an aqueous solution in his laboratory under conditions very similar to those that prevailed on the primordial Earth. Left alone, the solution produced adenine, one of the 4 nucleotide bases that make up DNA. To make a complete nucleotide, these bases need to gain a sugar called ribose and a group of phosphates. Biochemists think they know how the phosphate group formed. They're now trying to find out how the ribose is attached. Once nucleotides formed, the next step was to join together to make chains called polynucleotides. In the 1980s, researchers found that a clay called montmorillonite, which was abundant on the primordial sea floor and in hot pools of water on land, is the perfect catalyst for this process. Some of these long polynucleotide chains, like ribonucleic acid or RNA, are able to make copies of themselves. The copies aren't always perfect. Mistakes creep in, but some imperfectly copied molecules would have been better adapted to the environment than others. These successful molecules continue to replicate and pass on their traits, while weaker or less well-adapted molecules would have broken apart. As RNA molecules replicated themselves, they shared their environment with other chemicals that thrive in montmorillonite clay. One group, called lipids, have a natural tendency to clump together to form spherical structures called micelles. RNA molecules that attracted these lipids would therefore find themselves protected inside a micelle membrane. Because they were better protected, they better survived and replicated more successfully. There you have the first primitive cells. They look nothing like the complex cells we have today for a very good reason. Over 3.7 billion years they've evolved. I'll tackle the subject of evolution in another video. Over hundreds of millions of years, RNA grew more complex. The single strand became a double strand, and the better adapted DNA molecule evolved. One of the differences between RNA and DNA is that DNA needs proteins to replicate itself. Proteins are made of amino acids, which are often called the building blocks of life. So where did the first ones come from? No, there was no need for God. A number of experiments using montmorillonite have produced not only amino acids, but long chains of amino acids called polypeptides. Montmorillonite, it turns out, is a natural breeding ground for all kinds of complex organic chemicals. It has to be said that this research is in its infancy, and current hypotheses are nowhere near as solid as the theory of evolution, which has been around for 150 years and has overwhelming evidence to support it. But the reality is a far cry from the idea that scientists believe life popped out of nowhere. If God did indeed create life, then where did he come in? Step 1, step 2, and why? If the chemical process can happen on its own, why would God need to intervene at all? Before I go, I just want to look at a couple of other hoary old arguments that have been used and which also show a complete ignorance of science. Really? Just because creationist websites like to pass this myth around doesn't make it true. We know it's not true. Left alone, organic chemicals can and do polymerize to form longer, more complex chemicals. Oh, that sad argument. The fact is that the natural formation of replicating chemicals doesn't conflict with any of the laws of thermodynamics. People who make that argument need to read the law, because I suspect most of them have never done so and are just mindlessly repeating an urban myth that's already been debunked. As I've said, we still have a lot more to learn about this process. Researchers know that there are many more intermediate steps that we haven't yet discovered. And when all of them are found, there will still be fundamentalists around to say, but you can't prove that this is how life started on Earth. No, we probably never will. But what we can say is if there's a natural process by which the first replicating molecules appeared on Earth, then we don't need to invent gods, goddesses, and other invisible deities to explain it. Ultimately, this isn't a guessing game. It's a detective trap.
Okay. Before I get into the last little installment, I'm going to do another video clip by the same guy who did the last one, the one on abiogenesis. This last one will be, of course, on evolution. These two videos are, well, the evolution one is called Evolution Made Easy, if you want to watch it with a better looking picture to look at, because I'm filming with my camera, my computer screen, and whatever. Anyway, yeah, so the last little bit's going to be about evolution. But if there's anything, I hope that if any Christian comes across this video and actually watches it, that if there's any little small piece of information that they get from this video is there are three distinct sciences. Three distinct sciences that they with their Christianity, whatever, their creationism idea, they want to say that their creation idea replaces all three of these sciences. Not just evolution. They're not saying that creationism is right and evolution is wrong. They're saying creationism is right and cosmology, abiogenesis, and evolution are all wrong. Three sciences, not just one. And they don't even bother to name the other two. Now, granted, abiogenesis took me some doing to learn how to pronounce it, and I still don't know for sure if I'm pronouncing it right. I'm using abiogenesis because that sounds the most like a real word to me. But anyway, they don't even bother. They don't even bother calling it cosmology or abiogenesis. They just say evolution. I don't believe in evolution. We didn't come from nothing. No, when you say we didn't come from nothing, you're not talking about evolution. You're talking about abiogenesis. That's what you're talking about. And you're saying you don't believe that life came from non-living things. And yet you think God created life from dirt. Seems a little bit of a hypocritical thing to me, Oh, it's okay if it's your special dirt. But if it's just ordinary dirt, no, it couldn't have happened. It has to be special dirt. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I thought putting together a video that kind of explains in simple terms the three things: cosmology, abiogenesis, evolution, might be a good idea. So maybe Christians, if nothing else, can understand there are three separate sciences here, not just one. Three. So you're saying creationism is right. Creationism is right. Evolution is wrong. Creationism is... God, I can't say it. Creationism is right. Abiogenesis is wrong. I had to think about it that time. Creationism is right. Cosmology is wrong. You're basically saying all these other sciences and all these scientists that have worked their asses off to study and research and test and retest and theorize and challenge each other and disprove and redo and whatever. All this hard work that these men and women have put so much time and effort into trying to discover the answers. All of it's bullshit because God did it. Yes, God did it. And you don't need any evidence to show for what you think. You don't need anything to prove it. No, you have a book. That's fine. That's enough. You don't need to have actual evidence. No. I'm sorry. It's so hard for me to deal. It's so hard for me to, these people that say, oh, well, where's your evidence? You know what? There's tons of it. Go out and read a book. Read some books. These sciences, people aren't hiding them. They're not a secret mystery. They have articles all over the place about these sciences. They have books all over the place about these sciences. There are YouTube videos that explain in very simplistic ways that even somebody like myself can understand. You too can seek out the understanding of these things instead of just going, we don't believe life comes from rocks, instead of just, do I look like a monkey to you? Well, maybe I do, but I'm just saying, it's like, instead of coming up with these stupid, simplistic, or over-exaggerated statements that absolutely don't remotely coincide with what the science is saying. And it's like, all you do when Christians say things like, well, my father wasn't a monkey, or I didn't come from no monkey, or, life couldn't come from rocks. All you're doing when you make those stupid statements is showing your own stupidity. It's true. That's all you are. That's what you look like to anybody who has any understanding at all of these sciences. All you're doing is showing how stupid you are and how completely you do not understand, and you don't understand the science. You're showing how much you do not understand the science. You might as well put a neon sign across your fucking face that says, idiot. You know, and you're proud of it too. You're proud of how stupid you are. And you splash it all over YouTube about how stupid you are. You don't fucking bother, you know, to look at a video, watch a video. This guy made a very good video, a couple videos. He's got tons of stuff. I'll put his name in my things and the links to these videos. He's got tons of great videos about the various sciences. If you're too lazy to look at articles, if you're too lazy to go buy some books and read and learn, just look at some videos on YouTube. You're already here. Why not invest a little of your time to look, and not just look and ha ha ha, that's just so stupid. Listen and try to actually understand. You know, understand what they're saying. So, you know, at least when you argue, if you still insist on not believing in the science, you know, at least you can argue intelligently with the people who are saying they think it's real. They think this is the answer. You can argue intelligently and say, no, I don't think this is right, and this is why. And you're not sounding like a complete moron by saying, oh, life doesn't come from rocks. I think there's a little more to it than that. Or, I never came from no monkey. You know, if you would research, if you would read just a tiny little bit about evolution, just a little bit, you would understand that evolution doesn't say that humans evolved from monkeys or that humans evolved from apes. Never says that. Ever. It has never said that. We come from a common ancestor as the apes. You know what here's a very generalized example of what that's saying. Okay, you know, a wolf. Imagine. Okay, I wish I had I have a wolf statue in my bookcase, but I'm not going to go get it. Imagine I'm holding a wolf statue as a visual effect. Okay. From wolf, because of human, well, we won't even imagine, we'll try to simplify this as much as possible. From the wolf, this is the ancestor of dogs, right? Ancestor of dogs, ancestor of poodles, ancestor of a Great Dane. Now, did the Great Dane come from the poodle? Did the poodle come from the Great Dane? No. They both came from the wolf. Their common ancestor is the wolf. Poodle can't be a Great Dane. Great Dane can't be a poodle. But they both came from this one. Here, this is the wolf. They came from the wolf. This is the fucking common ancestor that we came from over here, and apes came from over here. This guy. Do you get it? We can't be these guys over here. They can't be us. But we did come from the same common ancestor. And that's what evolution says. That's what evolution claims about humans. We're like 99% of the same DNA as chimps. You know, that doesn't just accidentally happen. God didn't make a mistake and go, oh, you know, that human's too hairy. I'm going to do a do-over, and it's not going to have hair anymore. You know? Anyway. So that's all. I just wanted to put together a video that tries to make clear the three different things, three different sciences. Christians who want to say that evolution is not true, and all they have in their arsenal is a Bronze Age book and a primitive little story. That's all the ammo you have against evolution. That's all the ammo you have against abiogenesis. And that is all the ammo you have against cosmology. You really have no ammo. That's the problem. And rather than continue to walk around and looking like a stupid person on YouTube, why not learn about some of these sciences? There's lots of Christians out there that understand and even agree with the science and still are Christians. They look at it, and this is how I did when I was a Christian. I looked at science with wonder, like, wow, these are the building blocks that God used to make everything. You know, I didn't say, oh, this isn't real, this didn't happen. I believed it happened, but I believed that God controlled it all. So you could still actually believe in God and be a Christian and have a little bit more understanding of science and maybe even respect science instead of ridicule and mock it. You know, you don't have to, doesn't have to topple your belief if you don't let it. If you want to incorporate, like I did, the two things. But for me, I couldn't because I saw other reasons why I don't think there's a God. I saw a lot of other reasons, and I saw even more clearly the little undeniable thing about even if this thing did exist, why would I ever want to follow it? You know, the moment you take your God glasses off and you start seeing the world without the the assumption starting from the get-go that this is all true, the moment you look at it objectively without that assumption, God starts looking like a very evil, malicious, sadistic, vile creature that creates evil. He's not the enemy of it. He creates it. He creates. He manipulates it. He controls it. It's part of his plan. It's supposed to happen. It's a tool that he wields. He is the wellspring from which all evil comes from. He is the source of it. He created hell. He created Satan. He created all of it, knowing ahead of time all this shit. He did it anyway. Because he is the absolute foundation of pure, unwavering evil. The moment I realized that, there's no way I would worship him. So anyway, we're kind of detouring off the the point of my video, so I'm going to end this. If you've been watching, I hope you might have learned something from my attempts at trying to explain. I'm going to go ahead and play the third one now, the evolution video, and then that'll be it. So thanks for watching.
That you came from ape-like creatures or anything like that. I mean, did your grandfather look like that? Did your grandfather look like that? Did your grandfather look like that?
In the video Natural Selection Made Easy, I looked at heredity and showed a mechanism by which evolution could be predicted. There are so many observed examples of organisms changing that even fundamentalist preachers like Ken Ham can't pretend it doesn't happen. They've even embraced the idea in order to explain how Noah fitted all those animals onto the ark. But they don't accept that evolution can create new species, or that evolution is responsible for the abundance of life we see all around us. So in this video I want to show some of the evidence that makes evolution an accepted fact among biologists all over the world. Previous videos showed how the Earth's sedimentary rocks are like the pages of a book, taking us back through time. 19th century geologists discovered that the lowest and oldest layers contained a small variety of very primitive marine species. Higher sedimentary layers held more varied and more complex creatures. The progression suggested that these animals didn't appear suddenly, but were gradually evolving. But there were sudden disappearances. This layer of rock, for example, marks a catastrophic mass extinction about 250 million years ago. The rocks below this line are full of marine fossils, but in the rocks above, they're all gone. There were 5 global mass extinctions we know of, each one wiping out between 50 and 95% of species. Each was followed by the gradual recolonization of the Earth by surviving organisms that again began to change and become more complex until the next mass extinction. If this increasing complexity really did mean some kind of evolution, we'd expect to see it in individual species as we track their fossils through millions of years of sedimentary rock. And we do. Either each species is suddenly being killed off, only to be replaced by the sudden appearance of something that's almost identical, or we're seeing the changing morphology of a single species through time. We'd also expect to see traces of an animal's evolutionary ancestry in its morphology today, and we do. Take a look at this skeleton of an ape's hand. It looks just like a human hand, except it's not. In fact, it's not an ape's hand either. It's a whale's hand, or at least what used to be a hand in its ancestral past and is now used as a flipper. The morphology of animals today is full of remnant body parts that have been changed and adapted, just as evolution predicts. In the video on natural selection, I showed how a hypothetical animal might evolve into 2 different species. At first, the 2 types would be able to reproduce, then reproduce with difficulty, and then not reproduce at all. We can't watch it happening in mammals today because it takes several thousand generations, but we can see snapshots of it frozen in time. Modern horses, for example, separated from zebras several million years ago. They can still reproduce, but with difficulty, because a horse's DNA has 64 chromosomes and a zebra's 44. When an offspring is produced, it's sterile, exactly what evolution would predict. An even better example is found around mountains, where a species evolves as it spreads geographically. Each species can interbreed with the one next to it, but the species at each end of the line can't interbreed with each other. Among organisms with very fast reproduction rates, such as bacteria and flies, separation into new species has indeed been seen. This, for example, is a flavobacterium that eats nylon. It was found in a waste outlet near a Japanese factory that produces the stuff. The problem is nylon was only invented in 1935 and is completely synthetic and undigestible to other bacteria. Were nylon-eating bacteria for some reason present in the nylon-free Garden of Eden and managed not to starve to death? Or did God endow some bacteria with the gift of nylon digestion in 1935? Or does this fit perfectly with evolution, and they evolved because of a mutation sometime between the invention of nylon and their discovery 40 years later? The answer came when researchers kept a completely different bacterium in a similar nylon-rich environment, and the same mutation occurred. DNA research has only added to the overwhelming evidence of evolution, but it's also completely shaken up the evolutionary tree and shown in much greater detail which animals share a common ancestor and when they separated. Researchers are now manipulating DNA to discover a treasure trove of evolutionary information. It's long been known that ancestral traits buried deep inside DNA can get switched on by accident with very obvious results. But they can also now be deliberately switched on in research labs. Chickens, for example, don't have teeth, but their distant ancestors did, and the code for it is still buried in their DNA. Activate the right gene, and you get a chicken with teeth. In the context of this wealth of research and evidence, it still beggars belief that people can not only display complete ignorance of evolutionary theory, but feel qualified to lecture on it.
This is what evolutionists have been searching for hundreds of years. This is called the crocodile.
Which brings us neatly to those often asked questions from creationists. The problem is, we've searched high and low, but we simply can't find any scientist moronically uneducated, ill-read, and intellectually vapid enough to think that the theory of evolution even suggests such a laughable idea. I want to be kind to Kirk Cameron rather than suggest that half his brain must have been sucked out in a freak vacuuming accident, so I'll keep the tape rolling and see if we can catch what fellow debater Brian Sapient thought of the crocoduck idea.
This is called the crocodile. Can you see this?
See, Kirk, there's no crocoduck because there are no species in between a crocodile and a duck. And if you knew anything about the subject you so ardently criticize, you'd have learnt that. According to the evidence, whether you accept it or not, crocodiles and ducks are on completely separate branches of the evolutionary tree. But there is a common ancestor, and if finding it is so important to you, good news, we found it decades ago. It's called the archosaur, and it lived several million years before both crocodiles and ducks. Who's got the next question? Hands up. Oh, God, you again.
Science has never found a genuine transitional form that is one kind of animal crossing over into another kind, either living or in the fossil record.
Kirk, I don't know if you've looked in a biology book recently, but the fossil record is full of animals changing from one kind into another. It's one of the reasons we know evolution happened. Every animal is a transition between what went before and what comes after. If you think we haven't captured the instantaneous moment that one species turns into another, that's because there isn't one. It's like asking, where's the intermediate form between this and this? We know that this species existed at one time and is now gone, and it seems to have been replaced by this species. We can scour the archives and dig up as many transitional photos of George Bush as we like, but we're never going to find a single shot of W changing from a baby into a man. What we will find are the various transitional forms in between. If you're talking about gaps in the record, Kirk, sure, there are lots of them. This is all I could find when I Googled images from the life of George Bush, so of course there are gaps. If I went on a digging expedition, I could probably find 100 more. But even if I had 1,000 chronologically spaced photos of George Bush, there would still be gaps in between. As I mentioned in the last video, we now know that evolution, just like the growth of George Bush, doesn't happen evenly. The few years in between this photo and this one mark very few changes, but there's been a huge change in the same period of time between this photo and this one. But even when evolution happens quickly, it's still not instantaneous. For some animals, we've got a very good fossil record, and the time gaps between fossils are small. This shows evolution very clearly. For other animals, the gaps are longer, and the record is far less complete. But there's no suggestion that a deity steps in whenever there's a gap in the fossil record and changes one animal into another. Yes, I get that a lot. A theory in scientific nomenclature is the highest form of proof you can get. To go any higher, you have to enter the realm of mathematics. In all the sciences, there's still a lot more to discover, a lot more to understand, and a lot more to explain, whether it's atomic theory, the theory of gravity, or the theory of evolution. These are all cool theories, and if the peanut butter man and crocoduck boy don't like the scientific terminology, then get over it and accept that evolution is now a fact. It's so much a fact that researchers now depend on evolutionary theory to study antibiotic resistance and crop pests and new diseases and to develop new drugs. Fortunately for us, the biologists who are making all these advances didn't get their education at the Ken Ham School of Evolutionary Theory.